Hello, I'm back. Being a 2000s kid, What's New Scooby-Doo was probably the most nostalgic series, even if I watched the original more. What's New really was a step into a new generation. Even though it's considered mostly mediocre, I'm sure there are still some good episodes. So, let's get into it. I very vaguely remember this thing, mostly because it's more of an ice creature really. Like, come on, Shaggy even points this out in the episode, so could you really not come up with something better? The Glacier Ghoul, the Frozen Freak, they're all there, and just like its name, the snow creature's design is also pretty bland. Remember kids, red eyes always means bad. In terms of the episode, I guess it was fine. Fred broke his leg, which was pretty funny. The ski setting was not very interesting. I mean, we've gone over it in other series, so it's nothing new. Solving the mystery made up for the plot a bit though, since the concept of the monster being made from see-through lucite is kinda cool. Overall, this is a pretty fine Scooby-Doo episode, and it's pretty decent for a first, probably brought in new viewers and stuff I guess. Also, Velma murks someone with her sneeze. I'll give it a 3 out of 10 for the monster, a 5 out of 10 for the plot, and a 6 out of 10 for memorability, bringing it to about a 5 out of 10. Not too bad, I guess. I do remember this episode, and I remember liking it quite a bit. The Dinosaur Spirit is probably the worst looking monster in this series. I mean, he's the definition of a McDonald's toy, and a mouldy one at that, so I can't say I'm a fan of his design. But the implementation of the dinosaur was pretty cool. It starts off with bones being taken from a spiritual site, and then uses 3D movies to have it attack the gang. It takes the 2000s era use of 3D in its concept, and the chase scene within the mines was pretty cool. And guess what? It even uses modern technology in the villain's plot. That's logical. It also introduces this Australian guy, who very unironically is called Melbourne, and he's in some later episodes, so it's nice to see them expanding the Scooby-Doo cinematic universe. Overall, this is a good episode. The monster is a 4 out of 10, the plot is an 8 out of 10, and the memorability is a solid 7. So, 3D Struction gets a good 6.5 out of 10. Also, the dinosaur has a pretty cool roar, and yes, roars are very important to me. It's not really an ape, is it? Just because it looks vaguely simian, you can't really... You know what, I'm overthinking it. This is quite a unique episode. It's set in NASA, and this alien egg is hatched, and for once they don't actually show you the monster off the bat. That's pretty cool, because just like in the movie Alien, they have to track this thing down as it evolves and stalks them. It's a cool premise, and it allows the episode to explore cool space stuff, like the dehydration machine that leads to a pretty funny gag between Scooby and Shaggy. It also sets up a lot of clues and suspects throughout the episode, so it feels like a true PG-rated alien mystery. It's a good episode, getting a 6 out of 10 for the monster, since its colour scheme was unique but a bit goofy, an 8 out of 10 for plot, and another 8 out of 10 for memorability. A decent 7 out of 10 B-tier monster. I genuinely had to sit down and rewatch this episode in full, because I barely remember a thing. If I told you that 2 train conductors rose from the dead to fight each other with airbending, you probably wouldn't believe me. The ghosts of the Leland brothers are boring. I guess we're back to old-timey ghouls again. Yeah, no one actually liked those. Their designs are lame and the plot is drab. New Orleans is a sick setting for a Scooby-Doo mystery, but not when it comes to these schmucks. The monsters are a 2 out of 10, the plots are 3, and the memorability is like a 2. Pretty cringe episode with 2.5 rating, so it can go away to E-tier. The mystery machine becomes a sentient monster because it has a scary mouth, I guess. The green headlights and creepy music are a plus though. In a series like Scooby-Doo, making the mystery machine a monster was bound to happen at some point, and to be honest, they pulled it off fairly well. I'm not going to pretend it's super deep or anything, but the mystery machine was something they could always rely on, and having it turn against them was a unique concept. They could have made it superficial very easily, by giving the mystery machine a backstory fleshed out. If I was ranking the mystery machine normally, it'd be a straight 10, but since I'm basing it on monsterness, I'd give it a 7, and 7 for the plot, and an 8 for memorability. bringing it to a total of 7.5 out of 10 and fitting it nicely into B tier. I mean, that firebolt thing he's got there is kind of cool. And for the Ghost of the Magician, I guess his design is kind of unique. This guy looks unique. Yeah, I don't have much else to say about him. He's probably a 4.5 overall, so he's pretty lame. Look, make all the furry jokes you want, but this thing isn't a ghost. I'd give you ghoul, I'd even give you a gremlin or something, but this is definitely not a ghost. In fact, in the official fandom page, it's referred to as 3 different things, so I guess that's the real mystery. Regardless, this episode really shines in the plot. The theme park setting, while not new, is pretty exciting and there's a lot they can do with the set pieces. The mystery is also pretty good, as it kind of made sense and the character wasn't actually doing anything illegal or evil in the end, so she kind of got let off. So that's something original, I guess. This is overall a good episode, earning a solid 7.5 out of 10. This is a classic What's New episode. I saw this one on TV quite a lot, and I can't say I dislike it. Animals are already pretty scary, but add a piss yellow glow and a spooky sound, and you've got a pretty legit monster. I mean, they are just animals, but the concept of demon beast is pretty spooky.
What in the world's that sound? It is not of this world. It's the demons. Wait, stop! They're stopping! Wait, stop! They're stopping us!
The safari and jungle location is pretty cool, and I like the characters as well. The progression as they each reveal their true identities was well done, so even though the bad guys were pretty obvious by the end, it was a good story. I'd give these P-mans a good 6.5 out of 10, right into C tier. Pretty sick name for a sea serpent, I must say, and not a bad design either. It's a good balance between stylistic and classic sea serpent, so props to that. I don't know which came first, but Moto Shondo is very similar to the Loch Ness Monster from the movie. Apart from that, the episode isn't too interesting. It's your normal Scooby-Doo beach episode, and there's even a ship graveyard, like in Captain Cutler's episode. She sees sea monsters at the seashore gets a 5 out of 10, because it's not really memorable or anything. I had this episode on a DVD box set, and I remember this episode pretty vividly. The Headless Snowman was a pretty damn scary monster as a kid, and it's a cool idea as well. I mean, it's not technically headless, but you know, it can throw its head, so... Destroying chimneys was a metaphorically interesting villain thing for him to do, and there was a pretty sinister scene in the episode. And I like the plot too. Having some guy freeze to death inside a snowman is some pretty dark shit, and it sets up the gold bricks hidden in the chimneys very well. The episode ends on a wholesome note as well, so I like this. It has a good message and wasn't a parody or anything, so it stands alone. I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10, and it's our first A tier. Pretty cool.
I think you're full of Why don't you mind your own pal? I'm a cartoon star. I have more people telling me what a 必要はないね。なぜならその大切な髪の毛の乗っかってる頭をぶっ飛ばすと予告するからだ。まず我がバッドカンパニーはお前の足を打つ。お前は逃げられなくなる。次に腕にダメージを与える。もはやガードはできなくなる。そしてそこでその髪型とともに脳みそを撒き散らすと予告しよう。絶対突撃
Yeah, the toy soldiers, can't say much more than that. They're about a 4 out of 10, I guess. Are you serious? I mean, I guess the Faceless Phantom looks kind of cool, but not as a Scooby monster. This episode takes place in a movie studio, for God's sake. Could they really not come up with anything better? They could have parodied some of the classic monsters, and even this Dinosaur Spirit could have made a cameo appearance. But dear lord, this Ben 10 reject has the deadest laugh I've ever heard. It's like they switched voices with one of those evil minions from Despicable Me 2. The rest of the episode is alright, I guess. There's some cool action involving the movie stunts and some funny moments, but the lack of a good monster really weighs this episode down. I'd give it a 5.5 out of 10. This has to be the most mediocre monster on this list so far. I mean, the zombie gladiator really does feel like a mini-boss, rather than a main episode monster. And what makes it worse, this thing could actually be a ghost. For years, Scooby-Doo has labelled all manners of creatures as ghosts, but now that there finally is one, it gets sidelined as a zombie. Not very pog Scooby-Doo. Nonetheless, the zombie gladiator is pretty boring. The Italian setting of this episode is a nice change of pace, but other than that, it was nothing too special. Pompeii and Circumstance was like a 2 out of 10, so pretty bad. Unless I'm missing something, this is the first episode to not have a pun in the title, so... From what I've heard, this is quite a popular episode, but I personally never even watched it. The baseball spectre is just not scary. He's just a guy who can't afford a new shirt. Maybe it's because he's dead, but, you know. And speaking of dead, if you look here, his legs are sort of skeletal. It might just be a detail, but he looks more like a skeleton than a spectre to me. Oh well, at least he has those flaming balls. Maybe it's because I'm not American, but the baseball setting wasn't really that interesting. At least it was fresh. I'd give this episode a C tier, probably a 4.5 or something. Another classic episode. 30-foot Shaggy might be a bit gimmicky and a little on the nose, but he is a very recognisable monster from what's new. I love the idea behind him, that being Shaggy was tricked into thinking he was transforming into Shagzilla and eating Tokyo, where in reality he was just in a model city. I think if it was happening all in Shaggy's head, it would have been a lot better, as a giant robot Shaggy monster is pretty ridiculous, even for Scooby-Doo. And it happens for a cursed pizza, which is pretty much what you'd expect. I like the Tokyo setting, and the chase scene was a lot of fun, with some nice representation of Japan, like them taking off their shoes indoors. I'm looking at you, USA. I like this episode overall, and I think it deserves a solid B tier with a 7 out of 10 rating. I remember that this was definitely one of the creepiest episodes. The Mummy on Pharaoh Scamsies is a great monster, taking a new spin at the mummy trope and revealing some of the grislier details. The Mummy is a very creepy villain, even today. Like, watch this clip.
Especially if we just ignore that spooky pyramid right behind us.
The lighting, the silhouette, the flowing bandages from his body, it all adds to the general sinister feeling around this guy, and that's great. He can also turn people into zombies. Airbending and zombification aren't powers you usually see with the Mummy, but it's incorporated well into this episode. The plot is also excellent. There's a cool backstory section using hieroglyphics, which makes perfect sense, seeing as it's an Egyptian tale. It utilises the Egyptian landscape in a short but sweet way, not breaking any new ground, but developing the area pretty well. A hypnotist being the bad guy was obvious. It did make for a pretty dramatic red herring for child me. And speaking of the red herring, Melbourne is reintroduced, and he has a redemption arc, which is cool. He adds a new team dynamic to the gang, and fits well, even if it's just for one episode. Overall, this is probably one of the best episodes of Scooby-Doo ever. It does everything really well, while also having a properly creepy villain and character development for everyone. I'd have to give it a 9.5 to be honest, pushing it right into the S tier. Terrible episode name aside, this is a pretty unique episode. A race across the desert is something we haven't seen, and honestly, something pretty cool. It might be a rip-off of Tremors, but the gang being chased by a huge worm creature is pretty thrilling, and not something you see every day. There's not much I can say about Gassan and Grande, but it's pretty damn scary. We also get a bigger supporting cast and some new faces, like this guy, and this worm cult, which just look like caterpillar dicks. They might be silly, but they do help with world building, if you want to call it that. And the chase scene is a bop and a half, which is cool. This is a good episode, so I'd have to give it a solid 8 out of 10, putting it in A tier. This isn't a regular monster, since the entire house is technically the bad guy. And that's a pretty terrifying concept. Basically everything is against them. There's a lot of tense moments in this episode, like when that girl was trapped in a flooding room, or Shaggy and Scooby were being trash compacted. It might not be too original for something adult, but for a show like Scooby-Doo, that's pretty deep. I have a lot of memory from this episode, especially this mirror jump scare and the trash compactor scene, so I have to give it credit for some decent scares. There's also this robot butler called Jeeves, but that's just an evil robot, so whatever. The plot is pretty simple but effective. They basically just need to get out of the house, which works, since there's a lot you can do with a sentient house. As you'd expect, there's also a lot of high-tech stuff. A watermelon cutter is the best thing I've seen. So overall, it's a great episode, and it's spooky without being supernatural, which is pretty original for Scooby-Doo. I'd have to give it another 8 out of 10. The vampire is a boring monster. It looks like a businessman at a Billie Eilish concert after a few drinks. I guess the plot twist was that there were 2 vampires, but like, okay. This episode brought the Hex Girls back, which was a nice inclusion, and the Transylvanian setting was fine, I guess. However, the most surprising thing about this episode was that it was genuinely funny. It had some good jokes, and had that meta humour that Scooby-Doo sometimes brings about.
Should I drive or what?
It's on hold since this rude vampire dude decided to crash it.
Okay. Between Rude and Dude, did anybody else hear vampire?
Out.
And I know exactly what we need to do.
Split up?
Nope, set a trap.
What? But you always want us to split up before you set a trap.
Really? I never noticed that.
So I have to give it that at least. Overall, it's pretty disappointing still, so I'd give it a 3.5 out of 10. Another inevitable episode, but it's pretty different. Firstly, there's a laugh track, I think. When I was young, I never really noticed it, but now that I've grown up, it does get annoying, especially in Scooby-Doo. Nonetheless, this episode feels like one of the movies rather than a regular episode, but that's to be expected from a Halloween special. The plot is pretty unique, as they're visiting Velma's aunt and uncle for some Halloween parade, and there's a bigger cast of characters. Kiss is also in this episode, which doesn't contextually make sense, but whatever, the song's good. This episode had a pretty creepy air about it all the way through, and the monsters help out with that. The scarecrows are scary, I guess. I mean, it's easy to make them laughable, but these boys were pretty intense. I mean, not in this particular image, but some of them shoot fire out of their eyes. That's kinda cool. I'd give this episode a 7.5 out of 10. There's also a little reference to the reluctant werewolf, so that's nice. What the f is this episode? The cat creature is the ultimate furry. Get it? Because they're in a dog show and it's a cat? Yeah, whatever. We're also introduced to the Secret Six, which are a bunch of puppies. Are they some sort of reference to Hanna-Barbera characters in the past? I'm not sure, but they're in the dog show as well. There's also a Scooby imposter, and 2 dog nappers, which is basically the same as the episode from the original. Oh well, Homeward Hound is like a 4 out of 10, so it's not too good. Haha, I get the pun. However, this is a pretty freaky monster guy, and he has a hook too. It's a bit unnecessary, but, I mean, I wish he had other types of weapons, like chains or cuffs or something. Apparently it's because he died to a shark, which might explain the seaweed, but it still makes no sense why he can control the seaweed like its sentient limbs. It's probably just because he's a ghost. They make use of San Francisco well. The prison has a dark feel to it, as you might expect, and there are some cool scenes on the boats and the trams. There's also a skateboarding contest, which I guess San Franciscans like to do. In the end, it's revealed the cycle was some girl that wasn't allowed to compete. She thought it was because she was a girl, when it turns out it was actually because she was shy at skateboarding. Which is pretty hilarious, to be honest. Even though I didn't originally see much of this episode, I have to say it's pretty good, so I'd give it a B tier with a 7.5 out of 10. I'll never understand why Americans hate Canadians, and this episode takes place in Quebec, so... quick thing for segue, there's also a rock band called Simple Plan. At first I thought it was just for the pun in the title, but it turns out they're a real band, so that's something new. This episode isn't too special. I guess the animation department will have. The invisible Madman just kinda messes around with them, and he can only be seen with electricity, so shouldn't he be dead? Don't stress it, this is a 3.5 out of 10. This is a goofy idea, but I like it. A Scooby Snack monster makes perfect sense when you think about it. What's New needed a slime monster, so why wouldn't they use a series staple, that being Scooby Snacks? I'm not sure how he would taste, but, you know, you probably wouldn't want to find out. The factory setting is fun, and I like the fact that we get some more Scooby Snacks lore, even if I wish we delved deeper into the spiritual side. It's a good episode, and I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I don't care much about this episode. The Glassboro Dragon is just a regular European dragon, isn't it? There's nothing cool or interesting about it, but at least the red eyes look kind of menacing. It commits arson, and I'm almost 100% sure it reuses the roar from the Dinosaur Spirit. The gang are at a Renaissance fair, which has happened in plenty of shows before, so it's nothing new.
The Glassboro Fair is the world's only Renaissance fair held at a real medieval castle. It's totally authentic.
Mate, just go down anywhere south of London and you're guaranteed to find one. Yeah, this episode is pretty meh. It's a 4 out of 10 for me. This is a weird ass looking fish monster, but to be honest, it's pretty unique. If this thing was going around my polar camp, I would be creeped. The finned fiend has a decent design. The gang are once again in the North/South Pole, and there's a penguin, I guess. For a group of teenagers, they sure have a lot of bloody money to spend on trips. They played fast and loose with body temperature in this episode, but it was very dramatic seeing Scooby being literally drowned. The ending was a bit strange, because the finned fiend was actually taking this scientist guy into cryosleep, which, let me tell you, dunking someone into the Antarctic Ocean isn't a good idea. This episode is 5.5 out of 10. This is one of those episodes that I didn't watch and didn't know existed until very recently. Why? Well, it's just bland. Wakumi is just a big bird, that's it really. The New Mexico setting is cool, and it was nice to see Shaggy's friend, but apart from that, this episode is pretty boring. 2.5 out of 10. Please God, stop with these titles. Yeah, as you might expect, this one's set in Greece, and yeah, there is a lot of cool Greek representation. The monster is a centaur, not the first thing you'd think of, and to be honest, it's not very scary. I mean, we know it's a person in a costume, but it must be damn hard trying to catch the gang in that thing. Was Medusa really out of the question? They could have kidnapped their victim and replaced them with stone molds or something, like in the Mummy of Anchor episode. Was that really that hard? Anyway, the plot is pretty silly, but of the ordinary for Scooby-Doo. Shaggy gets scammed into buying some medallion that's meant to lure off monsters, when in fact it actually lures the Centaur, which wants the medallion to find the city of Atlantis. Yeah, it's a bit nonsensical, but they crammed a bunch of mythological stuff in one episode. Scooby commits murder at one point, so that's pretty neat. There was also this weird guy stalking them, but that just turns out to be a gag by the end. So this is a memorable episode, but it is pretty goofy, so I'd give it a 6.5 out of 10. I don't really remember anything about this episode, but a lighthouse is a good place to set a mystery. It's creepy, original, and desolate, and the villain is too. The creepy keeper is described as a ghost, but I'd say zombie suits him better. You know, he died at sea and then his corpse floated back to the shore and, you know, he came back to life, something like that. Even the spectre of the lighthouse sounds better because of, you know, light spectrum. This is a spooky episode. The setting is great, the monster's pretty menacing, and there's a Daphne Velma fusion who Grey Griffin voices, and Grey Griffin voicing a character is always worth a point. I'd give this episode a 7 out of 10. Another gimmicky episode. I don't see a large market for robotic cowboy towns, but it does create a cool scenario, I guess. I mean, these cowboy people are just robots, so they're not interesting or anything, but the premise is good. As the plot goes on, they realise they can't trust anyone, so it's like a shapeshifter scenario, since anyone they think is a real person could turn out to be an evil robot. I mean, the ending is kinda dumb, that being the inventor dude was also a fake, and the sheriff had created the town for roleplay, I guess? Yeah, okay, sure. This episode had some pretty lame monsters, but I like the plot, so I'll give it another 7 out of 10. So I guess they're just working through every holiday there is now. I can't wait until a Scooby Easter, when they catch the were-rabbit from Wallace and Gromit, or a Scooby Hanukkah, where Shaggy fights a ghostly menorah. The villains of these episodes are clones of the gang, which is lame, but probably has some deeper meaning to it. fighting yourself on Valentine's. Listen, I'm not going to get into this. Shaggy has a tsundere girlfriend, so that's something. Yeah, this is a pretty basic episode. Gang gets framed, gang proves they're evil clones, gang win. I'd give this episode a 3.5 out of 10. Probably the worst holiday episode. For some reason, I've seen this episode recently. I don't know where or how, but yeah. So I guess my memory is pretty fresh. I'd say Titanic Twist is a good design. It's unique, pretty horrific, and it fits with the wrestling theme. But I refuse to believe that it was being piloted by two kids. Just no. And yeah, this episode takes place in a wrestling arena, so there's some wacky action. Of course, this episode takes place before the WWE WrestleMania mystery movie, which is a whole other topic that I might make a video on if you guys want. Anyway, this is a good 6.5 out of 10, bringing it into C tier. Gargoyles are pretty scary, even baseline, but turning one into a monster is pretty cool. It has a good roar and the red eyes are a plus, but I don't know, there's just something a bit weak about this monster. As you might have guessed, this episode is set in Paris, so there's Paris stuff and Notre Dame, and the Hunchback, though he doesn't add anything to the plot. He basically wants to just catch the gargoyle, as a pet maybe. It was peculiar. So was the conclusion really, because it turns out the gargoyle that kidnapped Daphne's cousin was Daphne's cousin, which doesn't make sense since who originally kidnapped her. This episode's a 6 out of 10 for me, still pretty memorable. Probably one of the worst monster designs. He's literally just a guy. I mean, his tractor's pretty sick, but the tractor's only part of the monster, so it doesn't make up for the demon farmer's lameness. The plot is meh. The secret 6 puppies are back. If you're a fan of those, I'm sure you'll be happy. From what I remember, there were 2 demon farmers who were like 2 different farm owners who wanted to steal oil from each other's fields. In terms of Scooby-Doo plot, that's pretty original and pretty funny, but I cannot remember a single detail, so it's still quite poor. I'd give this episode a 4 out of 10. Another gimmicky episode, but I prefer the Frozen Fiend to the Baseball Spectre. It has a cooler design, and even if it's dumb, that hockey stick looks painful. Apparently it's the ghost of a Russian hockey player, so why would it be frozen? Why would he be wearing clothes? I'm pretty sure health and safety aren't a ghost's primary concerns. It's a pretty decent episode, and probably one of the better winter episodes, so I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Whoever thought of this is a maniacal genius. I don't know why on God's green earth someone would decide to take a clown, something scary on its own, and make it huge and robotic, but that's a scary ass monster, I'll tell you that. Like what the f***, man? And it blends really well into this episode. It takes place in a mini golf park. That's always a really fun place to say your cartoons, because there's a lot you can do with the courses and stuff. There's some fun scenes, and Velma has an actual character arc, since she overcomes her fear of clowns. Speaking of this, there's a flashback to their childhood where they appeared in their forms from a pup named Scooby-Doo. Firstly, it's a nice homage, and second of all, does that mean a pup named Scooby-Doo is canon to what's new? Because that opens a lot of gateways. Regardless, this is one of the best episodes, so I'd have to give it a 9 out of 10, putting it in S tier. The Toxic Terror probably has one of my favourite designs from What's New Scooby-Doo. It's glowy, goopy and scary, a perfectly concocted swamp monster, and the fact that it was formed from buried toxic waste is very unique. But to be honest, I feel like it should have come earlier in the show. It just feels like a classic monster for one of the earlier episodes, I don't know. This episode is based at summer camp, and camp is a pretty basic horror setting. It pales in comparison to the Camp Scare movie, which was released a few years later, and I've already made a video on that, which you can check out in the description, but it's a pretty decent camp episode. Some of the camp kids got involved, and surprisingly, Fred, Velma and Daphne aren't in this episode, which let Scooby and Shaggy shine for once. I'd give this episode a 7.5 out of 10. There's a lot to like about this episode. The dragon has a cool eastern design, and I'm a fan of the colour scheme. It could have been yet another mindless robot, but the fact that it was run by acrobats is conceptually cool. This episode is set in Hong Kong, so there's a nice location, but the biggest standout from this episode is the ducks. Shaggy's like trying to get his rubber duck repaired, and then they suit up in a giant duck mecha to fight the dragon. It's ridiculous but hilarious, so I'll take it. I'm sure r/ducks will be happy, and I'll give this episode a 7 out of 10. I don't know how to feel about this one. The base monster is just a skeleton guy, and his truck is cartoonish but not very imposing. My biggest problem is with the fact that he manages to keep sneaking into the race. How the hell does he keep that thing hidden? It turns out this thing was a robot piloted by those kids from the Titanic Twist episode, which, no, kids don't build massive robot skeleton monster trucks. The racetrack is a bit boring, and this episode is just fine overall, so I'd give it a 5 out of 10. The gold monster is unique, I guess. He's not much of a monster. He really just looks like one of those mannequins spray painted gold. I guess he can turn people into gold, which if you ask me is a benefit to society. This episode takes place in Fort Knox, which is an imaginative place to set it, and the Secret Six are here for the final episode, and I'd say they're utilised the best in this one. One of them is even called Knox, so that's confusing. The plot isn't really all that interesting, and the conclusion is once again pretty nonsensical. The drill sergeant was the gold monster, and he wanted to take over the lemonade business? The frick? This episode gets a 6 out of 10. SAO is trash, 1 out of 10. Fine, I guess I'll review it. This is the gamer episode. When I was younger, I found the Ocelot's pretty scary, and they had this weird tongue as well. But now they're just generic horde-type monsters, which I felt never really fit with Scooby-Doo. 1 or 2 well-designed monsters were always more special and recognisable than a bunch of furry critters. Basically, this episode is all about VR, which is, I guess, is an original monster concept. That scientist guy is back. His voice reminds me of Gyro from DuckTales.
Virtual reality, I can program any setting, any mystery, any character.
I call her the Golden Condor, because she'll soar through the Andes like a mountain bird.
At one point, the garage is flooded, and the mystery machine turns into a submarine, which is weird. In the end, it was revealed that it was all a game along, which is normally lazy, but it was actually quite cool in this episode, since, as Velma explains, all of the evidence was already there. This episode deserves a 7 out of 10. A coral creature is sort of new. It looks pretty derpy, but from what I remember, it was a real monster, like an actual creature that mutated from coral, and I'm not sure how to take that. The real bad guy was some hypnotist that was confusing people into being dragged under the sand and building something, and which is basically the same as the Mummy episode. Smash Mouth was also in this episode. Yeah, 6.5 out of 10. Phew, that was a long video. This took about 3 days to make, so I hope you enjoyed. If you agreed, leave it in the comments, and if I pissed you off, then leave that in the comments too. This is the finished tier list. You know, have a look, see if you think it's correct, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed again. Remember to subscribe, it'd help out a lot, and we're trying to reach 100 subscribers, and yeah, okay, bye.